At the divorce hearing, my ex-husband said arrogantly, "You're going to be poor again." His mistress mocked and said, "That's right, honey. Leave that stinky old woman with nothing." When the judge gave his verdict, my ex-husband fell back completely pale. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." The courtroom smelled like furniture polish and old paper. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded on top of a manila folder. Inside was a receipt from 1985, $47,000, the down payment that started everything. Richard sat across the aisle with his attorney, Gerald Moss. Next to Richard was Vanessa Torres, 34 years old, wearing a white pantsuit. Her perfume reached me even from 10 feet away, something expensive that made my throat tight. "I'm Margaret Chen, Maggie to people who used to be my friends, 62 years old, married for 41 years before my husband decided I'd expired." Judge Patricia Wilkins sat behind the bench, reading through documents with a neutral expression. She was maybe 55, with steel gray hair pulled back tight. "Mrs. Chen," my attorney Leonard Wu said quietly, "remember what we discussed. Stay calm no matter what they say." I nodded. Leonard was a family friend, semi-retired, doing this mostly as a favor because I couldn't afford Richard's big law firms. "Mr. Chen," Judge Wilkins said, "your attorney claims Mrs. Chen contributed nothing financially to the marriage. Is that correct?" Gerald Moss stood smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Chen was a homemaker throughout. The business assets were built solely through Mr. Chen's efforts. 41 years reduced to homemaker, like I was a housekeeper he was terminating. Mrs. Chen worked as a bookkeeper early on," Leonard said. "She also provided the initial capital investment." "Objection," Gerald interrupted. "There's no documentation of any investment. Mr. Chen's parents provided startup funds." "A lie. Richard's parents owned a small restaurant in Chinatown. They helped with advice, not money. My mother's life insurance gave us $47,000. I signed it over to Richard without hesitation because that's what wives did in 1985. "Your Honor," Leonard said, "we have a receipt." "A receipt proves nothing without corroborating documentation," Gerald said dismissively. Richard leaned back, arms crossed. He looked good for 63. Expensive suits and hair dye helped. He caught me looking and his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Mrs. Chen," Judge Wilkins said, "do you have additional documentation beyond the receipt?" Leonard touched my arm gently. "We're working on gathering additional evidence, Your Honor. We request a continuance." "Denied," the judge said. "This case has been delayed twice. We're moving forward today." My stomach dropped. Leonard said we might need more time. We'd been searching for the original partnership documents from 1985, but Richard claimed records had been lost, conveniently lost. "Mr. Chen requests," Gerald continued, "that the court recognize the business as separate property. Further, Mr. Chen offers spousal support of $1,800 per month for 3 years. $1,800? My apartment costs $2,100 monthly. I was already behind on rent because Richard froze our joint accounts the day he filed." "That's generous," Richard said loudly, "considering she contributed nothing but grocery shopping and nagging for 4 decades. Vanessa laughed, a bright, cruel sound. "That's right, honey. You're finally free from that stinky old woman." Judge Wilkins's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Chen, control yourself and your guest. Another outburst and I'll clear the courtroom." Richard held up his hands in mock apology, but I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. He'd made me small in front of strangers, made 41 years sound like nothing. I looked down at my shaking hands. I'd lost 20 pounds since Richard moved out. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every night I lay awake wondering where I'd gone wrong. "Mrs. Chen," Judge Wilkins said, "do you have anything to add before I make my preliminary ruling?" I thought about the receipt in the folder, about standing up and shouting that I'd given Richard everything. My mother's money, my youth, my education. I'd been enrolled at San Francisco State when I got pregnant with Daniel. I dropped out to take care of the baby while Richard built his business. our business. Except it had stopped being ours. No, Your Honor, I whispered. Leonard squeezed my shoulder. He'd warned me this might happen. Without documentation, it was my word against Richard's. And Richard had 3 lawyers and accountants who could make numbers say anything. Judge Wilkins made notes. I'm taking this under advisement. However, I'm concerned about financial discrepancies Mr. Wu raised. Mr. Chen, your attorney will provide complete financial disclosures by next Friday. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Gerald Moss nodded. Of course, Your Honor. As the judge gathered her papers, Vanessa leaned close to Richard and whispered something. Her hand rested on his arm, fingernails painted red. Richard listened, then smiled. The smile he used to give me when we were young. He turned and looked directly at me. His eyes were flat, empty. Then he leaned over and whispered something to Gerald, who nodded and made a note. That's when I knew. They had something planned. Something worse than taking the money or the house. They had another move waiting, another way to cut me down, and I had no idea what it was. The call came 3 days after the hearing. Leonard's voice was tight when he said we needed to meet immediately. Something about new testimony. I drove to his office in my 2008 Honda Civic, the one Richard had wanted me to get rid of years ago because it embarrassed him at client dinners. Now it was all I had. The check engine light had been on for 2 months, but I couldn't afford repairs. Leonard's office was above a Vietnamese restaurant in the Richmond district. The smell of pho broth followed me up the narrow stairs. He was waiting with the door open, his face gray. Maggie, sit down. I sat. My purse was practically empty except for $17 and my phone. I'd been rationing groceries all week, pasta and canned soup. Nothing fresh because fresh food spoiled, and I couldn't waste a single dollar. Your sister contacted Gerald Moss, Leonard said. She's volunteered to testify on Richard's behalf. The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but they felt scrambled, like a puzzle with missing pieces. Helen? I said. My sister Helen? Leonard nodded. He slid a document across the desk. Witness statement. Helen Marie Chen Morrison, age 65, sister of Margaret Chen. I scanned the words, but they swam together. Homemaker, never employed, financially dependent. My brother-in-law Richard supported her entirely. This isn't true, I said. My voice sounded strange, high and thin. None of this is true. I know, Leonard said quietly, but she's willing to testify under oath, in front of Judge Wilkins. I read it again. Helen claimed I'd never worked a day in my life, that Richard paid for everything from the beginning, that I was controlling and manipulative, always demanding more money for shopping and vacations. Shopping. I hadn't bought new clothes in 3 years. Vacations. The last time Richard and I traveled together was 2015 to Seattle for a business conference where I stayed in the hotel room alone while he networked. Why would she do this? I asked. Leonard leaned back in his chair. You tell me. Is there bad blood between you two? Bad blood. What a polite way to describe 40 years of Helen's resentment that our mother loved me more. That I got married first. That my husband built a successful business while hers stayed a middle manager at Pacific Gas and Electric. I thought about the last time I'd seen Helen. Christmas 2021, 2 months before Richard filed for divorce. She'd brought expensive wine and complained about her timeshare in Maui needing renovations. She'd looked around our house in Pacific Heights, the one Richard and I bought in 1994, and said it must be nice to have a husband who knew how to make real money. We've never been close, I said carefully. But I didn't think she hated me. Leonard tapped the document. According to this, you borrowed money from her multiple times over the years and never paid it back. $20,000 in 1998. $15,000 in 2003, another $30,000 in 2009. That's not true. I never borrowed money from Helen. She borrowed from me. Can you prove it? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The loans had been informal. Helen called crying about her daughter's wedding in 1998. Could I help? Just temporarily. I'd written her a check from our household account. She'd promised to pay me back within 6 months. That was 25 years ago. I have the canceled checks, I said. At least I did. They were in my office at home. The house Richard still lives in. Yes. Leonard made a note. We'll subpoena your financial records from the bank. But Maggie, canceled checks prove you gave her money. They don't prove she promised to repay it. My hands started shaking again. I put them in my lap where Leonard couldn't see. Why is she doing this? I asked again. Maybe Richard promised her something. Maybe she just wants to hurt you. Leonard's voice softened. Family betrayal is the worst kind. I thought about our mother. Shirley Chen died in 2008 after 8 years of Alzheimer's. The disease took her slowly, erasing her memory piece by piece until she didn't recognize either of us. I'd moved her into our guest room in 2000 when she could no longer live alone. Richard hadn't been happy about it, but he didn't fight me. For 8 years, I fed her, bathed her, sat with her through the confused nights when she thought she was a child again back in Guangzhou. Helen visited 3 times, once in 2002 for an hour, once in 2004 for Christmas dinner, where she stayed exactly 45 minutes, once in 2008 for the funeral. After Mom died, I'd found papers in her desk. Helen had asked her for money in 2001, $35,000. Mom had given it to her even though she was already sick, already forgetting things. Helen never mentioned it to me, never thanked me for taking care of the mother we were both supposed to love. There's something else, Leonard said. He pulled out his phone and turned it toward me. Text message from an unknown number. Your son knows the truth about his father's business. Ask him before Richard silences him. When did you get this? I asked. This morning. I tried calling Daniel, but it went straight to voicemail. Daniel, my son, 38 years old, partner at a corporate law firm downtown. He'd been distant since the divorce started. Not hostile exactly, just careful. Like he didn't want to choose sides, even though there were clearly sides to choose. I'll call him, I said. I tried 3 times on the drive back to my apartment. Voicemail every time. Hi, this is Daniel Chen. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. At home, I heated up canned minestrone soup and ate it standing at the kitchen counter. The studio was 400 square feet. Bed, small table, kitchenette, bathroom. Everything I owned fit into this space. 41 years of marriage reduced to 1 room. My phone rang at 10:30 that night. Daniel's name on the screen. I answered before the second ring. Mom, he said. His voice was strange, tight. Daniel, where have you been? Leonard said someone texted him about your father's business. Mom, I can't talk long. I'm at the office. I snuck into Dad's file room. My heart started pounding. What file room? He keeps physical copies of everything. The old partnership agreements, incorporation documents, everything from the 80s and 90s. Daniel's voice dropped lower. Mom, I found the original contracts from when you and Dad started the business. I sat down on my bed. The mattress creaked. What do they say? You were 40% owner. It's right there in the filing from 1985. Margaret Louise Chen, 40% equity stake in Chen and Associates Consulting. He paused. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I didn't remember, I said honestly. Your father handled all the business paperwork. He said it was simpler if he managed everything. He forged your signature on documents in 1995, Daniel said. His voice shook. Corporate restructuring that removed you entirely. The signature doesn't match. I compared it to your real signature on the 1985 documents. It's obvious. Can you make copies? I'm trying, but... His voice cut off suddenly. I heard voices in the background. Male voices. Then Daniel again, whisper fast. Dad's here. He's with someone. I have to go. Daniel. Wait. Mom, there's something else. Dad has an offshore account. Cayman Islands. I found wire transfer records. Over $1 million. He's been hiding money and... The line went dead. I called back immediately. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Sent 3 text messages. Are you okay? Call me back. Please answer. Nothing. I lay awake all night staring at the ceiling. 40% owner. Forged signature. Offshore account. My son in an office alone with Richard and someone else. Someone who might convince him to stay quiet. Or worse. At 7 in the morning, Leonard called. Maggie, turn on the news. I didn't have cable. I pulled up a local news website on my phone. The headline made my stomach drop. Prominent SF businessman faces IRS audit. Chen and Associates Consulting under investigation for potential tax fraud. There was Richard's photo. Professional headshot, confident smile. The article mentioned anonymous tips, financial irregularities, offshore accounts. It mentioned his pending divorce and questions about asset disclosure. Did you report him? Leonard asked. No, I said. I didn't know anything about offshore accounts until Daniel called last night. Well, someone did. And that someone just made your divorce a lot more complicated. I thought about Daniel in that file room. Daniel finding documents that proved Richard was a fraud. Daniel whispering into the phone before the line went dead. My phone buzzed. Text message from Daniel's number. 2 words. I'm sorry. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. 3 days past due on rent. I had until Friday to pay $2,100 or vacate the premises. I had $462 in my checking account. The account Richard hadn't frozen because I'd opened it secretly 2 months before he filed for divorce. Some instinct told me to hide a little money. Not enough, it turned out. Daniel hadn't answered his phone in 5 days. I'd driven to his condo in Soma 3 times. No answer at the door. His car was gone. I called his law firm, and the receptionist said he'd taken emergency family leave. She didn't know when he'd be back. Emergency family leave. My son had vanished, and I didn't know if Richard had threatened him or paid him off or worse. Leonard called Wednesday morning. Richard's attorney filed an emergency motion. They're claiming you made false reports to the IRS, and they want all temporary support payments suspended immediately. I didn't report him to the IRS, I said for the 10th time. I know, but someone did, and Richard's using it against you. Judge Wilkins granted a temporary freeze until she can sort out who filed what. So that was it. No $1,800 a month? Not that it covered rent anyway, but it was something. Now it was nothing. There's more, Leonard said carefully. Your sister filed an amended witness statement. She's now claiming you threatened her to try to stop her testimony. I laughed. It came out harsh and wrong. Threatened her? I haven't spoken to Helen in 2 years. According to her statement, you called her repeatedly last week and told her you'd ruin her reputation if she testified. She's included phone logs showing 17 calls from your number. I never called her. Maggie, did you lose your phone at any point? Even for an hour? I thought back. Last week I'd gone to the grocery store. My phone had been in my purse the whole time except when I left my purse in the car while I returned the shopping cart. Maybe 5 minutes. Someone called Helen from my phone, I said slowly. Someone who had access to it. Richard? Leonard said. Or Vanessa. They're setting you up to look unstable. Thursday morning, the apartment manager knocked on my door. Nice woman named Rosa who'd always been kind to me. She looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry, but I need to do an inspection. We've received complaints about the unit. Complaints? From who? I can't say, but I need to check for code violations. She walked through my studio, opening cabinets, checking the bathroom, looking in the tiny closet. Everything was clean. I didn't own enough things to make a mess. Someone reported a gas leak, Rosa said finally, and possible hoarding situation. I don't see either of those things. Because they don't exist. She nodded. I believe you. But Mrs. Chen, you're 3 days past due on rent. I like you, but I have a job to do. If you can't pay by tomorrow, I have to start eviction proceedings. After she left, I sat on my bed and cried for the first time since the hearing. Not quiet tears, big, ugly sobs that made my chest hurt. I cried for 41 years of marriage. For my mother's money that started Richard's business, for Daniel who disappeared, for the home I'd lost and the sister who betrayed me. I cried until I had nothing left. Then I called Leonard. I need a place to stay. Leonard and his wife Sarah had a guest room in their house in the Sunset District. Small but clean, with a window that looked out on their backyard garden. They didn't ask for rent. Sarah made me soup, and Leonard printed out every document we had related to the divorce. We're going to fight this, he said. But Maggie, you need to prepare yourself. Richard has resources we don't have. He can drag this out for years. I spread the documents across the guest bed. Bank statements, tax returns, court filings, 41 years of paper proving I'd existed in Richard's life, even though he now claimed I'd contributed nothing. At the bottom of one box, I found something I'd forgotten about. My old day planner from 1985, dark blue leather, worn at the corners. I'd used it to track appointments when I worked as Richard's bookkeeper those first 3 years. I flipped through the pages. Meeting with First Republic Bank, March 12, 1985. Applied for business loan, declined. Second meeting April 3rd, still declined. Note in my handwriting, Mom's insurance money cleared, $47,000 deposited to business account. More entries. May 1985, Incorporated Chen and Associates. June, signed partnership agreement. My handwriting again, 40% equity stake. Richard, 60%. Filed with California Secretary of State. Filed with California Secretary of State. I grabbed my phone and called Leonard even though it was almost midnight. The original partnership agreement. It was filed with the state. There has to be a record. Maggie, that was 1985. Almost 40 years ago. But there's a record, right? The state keeps those records? Silence while he thought. Yes, they do. It might take some digging, but yes, those documents should still exist. Can you request them? First thing tomorrow, Leonard promised. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daniel's phone call, the forged signature in 1995. 10 years after we started the business, Richard had erased me from the paperwork, just removed me like I'd never existed. How many other documents had he forged? How many times had he signed my name to things I'd never seen? Friday morning, an envelope arrived at Leonard's house. No return address. Inside were photographs, 8 of them, printed on glossy paper. Richard and Vanessa on a yacht. Not just any yacht. A massive white vessel with Serenity painted on the side. They were drinking champagne. Vanessa wore a bikini that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Richard had his arm around her, both of them laughing. I flipped through the photos. The yacht docked at a marina, close-up of the name and registration number. Richard and Vanessa going into the cabin. Another shot of them on deck at sunset. The last photo was a screenshot of a purchase receipt. Serenity, 40-foot azimut yacht. Purchased March 2023 for $340,000. Buyer, Richard Chen. March 2023, 2 months ago. Right in the middle of our divorce when all assets were supposed to be frozen. Leonard came into the kitchen while I was staring at the photos. What's that? I showed him. He went very still. Who sent these? I don't know. But I had a guess. Daniel. My son who'd found Richard's file room, who'd discovered the offshore accounts and the forged documents, who'd disappeared after that phone call. This was Daniel telling me he was still on my side, that he'd found something Richard couldn't explain away. This is good, Leonard said slowly. This is very good. Richard just violated a direct court order. Sarah came into the kitchen, saw our faces. What happened? Richard bought a yacht with money that was supposed to be frozen during the divorce, Leonard said. $340,000 he claimed he didn't have. Sarah looked at the photos, then at me. Where did the money come from? That was the question. Richard's business was worth maybe $8 million according to his financial disclosures. But those disclosures were before the IRS audit, before someone anonymously reported offshore accounts. What if Richard had been hiding money for years, not just from the divorce, but from taxes, from business partners, from everyone? What if my $47,000 in 1985 had grown into something much larger, and Richard had been slowly stealing my share all along? Leonard's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression changing. Thank you. Yes, we'll be there Monday. He hung up and looked at me. That was the California Secretary of State's office. They found the 1985 partnership filing. Margaret Chen, 40% equity owner of Chen and Associates Consulting. Signed by both you and Richard, notarized and filed April 22nd, 1985. Can they send us a copy? They already did. It's in my email. He pulled up his phone and showed me. There it was. The original document I'd signed 38 years ago, back when I believed Richard and I were building something together. My signature looked different then, rounder, more confident. Margaret Chen, partner. We have him, Leonard said quietly. We have proof you were an owner, proof he removed you illegally, and now we have proof he's hiding assets. Judge Wilkins is going to destroy him. I looked at the yacht photos again. Richard and Vanessa drinking champagne like they'd already won, like I was already erased from history. But I wasn't erased. I had documents. I had photos. I had Leonard and Sarah who'd taken me in when I had nowhere to go. And somewhere out there, I had a son who was risking everything to help his mother. My phone buzzed. Text message from unknown number. Not Daniel's number. Someone else. The message said, "Check Richard's Instagram, posted 2 hours ago." I didn't have Instagram, but Sarah did. She pulled it up on her phone and searched for Richard Chen. His account was public. The most recent post was a photo of him and Vanessa on the yacht. Caption, "Living my best life with my beautiful wife. Some people deserve to be left behind." 300 likes. Comments from people I used to call friends. "You two are perfect together. So happy for you. About time you found real happiness." Vanessa had commented too, "Finally free from that bitter old hag." Leonard read over my shoulder. "They're idiots. They just gave us more evidence." But evidence wasn't what made my hands shake. It was that word, wife. Richard had married Vanessa, while we were still legally married, while our divorce was pending. "He can't do that," Sarah said. "You're still married to him." "Apparently he did it anyway," I said. My phone rang. Daniel's number. Finally. "Mom," he said. His voice was wrong. Flat. "We need to talk." Daniel came to Leonard's house on Saturday morning. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. His shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Sarah made coffee while the three of us sat at the kitchen table. Daniel wouldn't look at me directly. "Dad knows I took the documents," he said finally. "He called me into his office last Tuesday. Said if I testify for you, he'll remove me from his will entirely. No inheritance, no trust fund, nothing. There won't be anything left to inherit," Leonard said. "Not after the IRS finishes with him." Daniel rubbed his face. He said more than that. He said he'd make sure I never work in corporate law again in San Francisco. That he'd call every partner at every major firm and tell them I'm unstable. A liability. My chest hurt. "Daniel, you don't have to." "I already did it, Mom." He looked up at me then. His eyes were red. Before Dad found me in the file room, I'd already copied everything. Partnership agreements, wire transfers, corporate restructuring documents from 1995, all of it. I uploaded it to a secure cloud drive and I sent it to the IRS anonymously. "You reported your own father?" Sarah asked quietly. "I reported a criminal." Daniel's voice was hard. "That's what he is. He forged Mom's signature. He hid money offshore. He committed tax fraud for probably 20 years. He pulled out his phone and showed us screenshots. This is the Cayman account. Chen Holdings LLC, $1.2 million. Money he never disclosed in the divorce filing." Leonard leaned forward, studying the screen. "How did you access this?" "Dad keeps paper copies of everything in a locked filing cabinet. I know where he hides the key." Daniel scrolled through more images. Wire transfers going back to 2003. Small amounts at first, 20 or 30,000. Then bigger, 100,000, 200. He was skimming from the business and hiding it. "That's my money," I said. The words came out flat. "If I owned 40%, that's my money he stole." "Yes," Daniel said. "That's exactly what it is." Leonard made notes on his legal pad. "This changes everything. With this evidence, we can prove Richard has been systematically defrauding you for decades." "There's more," Daniel said. He swiped to another screenshot. "Vanessa. She's been involved for at least 2 years. I found emails between them from 2021, before Dad even filed for divorce. They were planning this. How to hide assets. How to make you look incompetent. How to get you to sign away any claims to the business." I thought about Vanessa in her white pantsuit at the hearing. That stinky old woman. She'd known exactly what she was doing. They both had. "Can you testify?" Leonard asked Daniel. In court? Under oath? Daniel hesitated. If I do, Dad will destroy me. He has connections everywhere. I'll lose my job. Maybe my law license if he pushes hard enough. Or, Leonard said carefully, you do the right thing and help your mother, and Richard goes to prison for fraud. Then he can't hurt anyone. The kitchen was quiet except for the clock ticking on the wall. Daniel stared at his coffee cup. I'll testify, he said finally. But I need help. Legal protection. Something. I'll figure it out, Leonard promised. After Daniel left, Leonard and I sat in his office going through everything Daniel had sent. The documents were damning. Richard had been stealing from his own company, from his investors, from me for 20 years. We need a forensic accountant, Leonard said. Someone who can trace all this money and put together a complete picture. I can't afford a forensic accountant. I can, Sarah said from the doorway. My father left me some money when he passed. We'll use that. Sarah, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. She sat down across from me. Maggie, what Richard did to you is wrong. Morally wrong and legally wrong. Let us help. The forensic accountant's name was Patricia Gomez. She was 50-something with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Leonard hired her on Monday, and by Wednesday she'd already started pulling records. Your husband is either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant, she told me during our first meeting. He left a paper trail a child could follow. She showed me spreadsheets on her laptop. Money moving from Chen and Associates to Chen Holdings LLC. Chen Holdings transferring money to accounts in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman accounts funding purchases like the yacht, like a condo in Vanessa's name in Miami, like a Tesla Model S registered to a shell corporation. Total value of hidden assets? Leonard asked. So far, about $3.1 million, Patricia said. And I'm only 3 days into this. Give me 2 weeks and I'll probably find more. $3.1 million. Money that should have been disclosed in the divorce. Money that partially belonged to me if I'd been a 40% owner all along. Here's what's interesting, Patricia continued. In 2021, right before he filed for divorce, Richard transferred $200,000 from the business account to Cayman. Biggest single transfer I've seen. Like he knew he needed to hide money fast. Because he was planning to leave me, I said. Exactly. And look at this. She pulled up another document. March 2023, the yacht purchase. He wired the money from Cayman to a dealer in San Diego. Paid cash, no financing. During the divorce, Leonard said. While assets were frozen. While he was claiming poverty and asking the court to reduce spousal support, Patricia added, this man is going down hard when the judge sees all this. That night, I lay in the guest bed thinking about karma. Richard had always been so careful, so meticulous. He'd built his business through attention to detail and never making careless mistakes. But he'd made a mistake with Vanessa. Let her post photos on Instagram like they were celebrities instead of criminals. Let her tag the yacht, the location, the date. Digital evidence of everything they were trying to hide. Thursday morning, Leonard got a call from Richard's attorney. Gerald Moss wants to negotiate, he told me after hanging up. He says Richard is willing to discuss a settlement. Now he wants to settle? I asked. After calling me a leech in court? He's scared. The IRS audit is expanding and he knows we have evidence. Leonard smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We're not settling. We're going to court and we're going to bury him. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Margaret Chen? A woman's voice. Professional. Yes? This is Andrea Walsh from the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm doing a story on Chen and Associates and the ongoing IRS investigation. Do you have any comment? My stomach dropped. How did you get this number? I'm a reporter, Mrs. Chen. It's my job. Sources tell me you've been married to Richard Chen for over 40 years and that you're currently in divorce proceedings. They also say you may have been an original partner in the business. Is that true? Someone had leaked the story. Maybe the IRS, maybe someone at the court, maybe Daniel. I have no comment, I said. Mrs. Chen, if you were a partner and your husband removed you illegally, that's a major story. Financial abuse, corporate fraud, people want to know. I said no comment. I hung up. But the damage was done. By Saturday morning, the story was online. Prominent SF businessman faces fraud allegations as wife claims stolen partnership. The article mentioned the IRS audit, the hidden offshore accounts, my 40% ownership claim. It quoted anonymous sources saying Richard had been living a double life for years. The article included the Instagram photo of Richard and Vanessa on the yacht. Caption underneath: Chen and his girlfriend Vanessa Torres on a yacht purchased during divorce proceedings. Leonard called. Have you seen the Chronicle? Yes. Richard's company lost their biggest client this morning, Hoffman Industries. They released a statement saying they can't work with a firm under federal investigation. Karma, fast and brutal. Sunday morning, I was drinking coffee in Sarah's kitchen when my phone buzzed. Text from Daniel. Turn on Channel 5. Now. I found Sarah's TV remote and switched to the local news. There was Richard's face filling the screen. Old footage of him at some charity event, shaking hands and smiling. The anchor's voice: Bay Area business owner Richard Chen has been hit with additional charges from the IRS. Sources say the investigation has expanded to include potential wire fraud and money laundering. Chen's attorney, Gerald Moss, declined to comment, but the case has shocked San Francisco's business community. The screen changed to show Chen and associates building downtown. Then Vanessa's face. A photo from her Instagram, the same one where she called me a bitter old hag. Chen's girlfriend, Vanessa Torres, age 34, is also reportedly under investigation for possible involvement in hiding assets. Torres worked as a sales representative at Chen & Associates before beginning a relationship with Chen while he was still married. I stared at Vanessa's frozen smile on the screen. She'd thought she was so smart, thought she and Richard could humiliate me in court and ride off into the sunset with millions of stolen dollars. Instead, she was on the news being called a co-conspirator. My phone rang. Leonard again. Judge Wilkins moved up the hearing, he said. Next Friday instead of 2 weeks from now. She wants to address the new evidence immediately. So soon? Richard's world is collapsing. His business is failing. The IRS is circling. And now the media is involved. He's desperate. Leonard paused. Maggie, we're going to win this. All of it. The partnership. The hidden money. Everything. After I hung up, I sat very still, holding my cold coffee cup. For the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't grief or rage. I felt power. Cold and clear and sharp as a knife. Richard had taken everything from me. My marriage, my home, my dignity. He'd tried to erase me from history, but you can't erase 41 years of proof. Can't delete forged signatures or hidden bank accounts or Instagram posts bragging about stolen money. Richard had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me, thought I was weak, passive, someone who'd accept whatever scraps he threw my way. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The courtroom was packed. I'd never seen so many people at a divorce hearing. Reporters lined the back wall. Richard's business associates filled 3 rows. I recognized some of them from company parties years ago when they'd shaken my hand and complimented my cooking. Richard sat at his table looking smaller than before. His suit was expensive, but he'd lost weight. His face was gray. Gerald Moss whispered to him constantly, but Richard just stared straight ahead. Vanessa wasn't there. According to Daniel, she'd left for Miami 2 days ago and wasn't answering Richard's calls. Judge Wilkins entered and everyone stood. She looked at the crowded room with obvious displeasure. This is a divorce proceeding, not a media circus. Anyone who disrupts will be removed immediately. She sat and shuffled papers. We're here to address significant new evidence that's come to light regarding the Chen marital assets. Mr. Wu, I understand you have documentation to present? Leonard stood. Yes, Your Honor, we have proof that Mrs. Chen was an original 40% equity partner in Chen & Associates Consulting, and that she was illegally removed from ownership in 1995. He approached the bench with copies of the 1985 partnership agreement. The one filed with the California Secretary of State. The one that proved I'd existed. Judge Wilkins studied it carefully. Mr. Moss, were you aware of this document? Gerald stood slowly. No, Your Honor. Mr. Chen informed me that his wife never had an ownership stake. So your client lied to you. Gerald's mouth tightened. It appears there may have been some miscommunication. Miscommunication, Judge Wilkins repeated flatly. She looked at Richard. Mr. Chen, did you or did you not remove your wife from company ownership without her knowledge or consent? Richard stood. His hands shook. Your Honor, that was a business decision made 30 years ago. My attorney at the time advised, answer the question. Did you remove her? Yes. The courtroom buzzed. Judge Wilkins banged her gavel once. And did you forge her signature on the restructuring documents? Richard looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at the floor. I don't recall the specific circumstances, Richard said. You don't recall forging your wife's signature? Judge Wilkins's voice could have cut glass. Mr. Wu, do you have evidence of forgery? Yes, Your Honor. Leonard presented side-by-side copies. My real signature from 1985, rounded and clear. The signature from 1995, sharper and slanted, obviously different. Patricia Gomez testified next. She walked Judge Wilkins through the spreadsheets showing money moving offshore, the Cayman accounts, the yacht purchase, the condo in Miami registered to a shell company but used exclusively by Vanessa Torres. Total value of undisclosed assets? Judge Wilkins asked. $3.4 million, Patricia said. That we've found so far. There may be more. And these assets were hidden during divorce proceedings when Mr. Chen was required to make full financial disclosure? Yes, Your Honor. Richard slumped in his chair. Gerald whispered urgently, but Richard just shook his head. I'd like to call Daniel Chen to testify, Leonard said. My son walked to the witness stand. He didn't look at his father. The bailiff swore him in and he sat down, hands folded tightly in his lap. Mr. Chen, Leonard said gently. You're Richard Chen's son, correct? Yes. And you work as an attorney at Morrison and Blake? I did. I resigned last week. That was news to me. Daniel had quit his job. The job Richard had helped him get through connections. Why did you resign? Leonard asked. Because my father threatened to have me fired if I testified here today. Daniel's voice was steady. He said he'd call every partner at the firm and tell them I was unstable, that I'd stolen confidential documents, that I couldn't be trusted. Did you steal confidential documents? No. I accessed files my father kept in his private office, files that contained evidence of fraud and tax evasion. I reported that evidence to the IRS anonymously because it was the right thing to do. Richard made a sound. Not quite a word, just a choked noise like something dying. Did your father attempt to bribe you? Leonard asked. Yes. He offered me $200,000 to say I'd made a mistake, that the documents I found were fake, or that I'd misunderstood what they meant. Daniel finally looked at Richard. He asked me to lie under oath to protect him. And what did you say? I said no. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. I said I wouldn't lie for him. Not even to protect his business. Not even to keep my inheritance. Judge Wilkins leaned forward. Mr. Chen, did your father threaten to disinherit you? Yes, Your Honor, multiple times. He said if I testified against him, I'd never see a penny of his money. That he'd leave everything to charity before he'd give it to a son who betrayed him. Daniel wiped his eyes. He said I'd chosen my mother over my own father, and that made me a traitor. I wanted to stand up and hug my son, tell him I was proud, that he'd done the right thing even though it cost him everything. But I stayed seated, hands clenched in my lap. Your Honor, Gerald said, standing. I'd like to request a recess to confer with my client. Denied. Sit down, Mr. Moss. Judge Wilkins looked at her notes. I see that Helen Morrison was scheduled to testify on Mr. Chen's behalf. Is she present? Helen stood from the gallery. She wore a navy dress and pearls. Her hair was styled perfectly. She looked like she was going to brunch, not betraying her sister. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Wilkins said, you submitted a statement claiming Margaret Chen threatened you to prevent your testimony. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Helen's voice was confident. My sister called me 17 times in 1 week. She said if I testified, she'd ruin my reputation, that she'd tell lies about me to our family and friends. When did these threatening calls occur? May 15th through May 22nd. Leonard stood. Your Honor, I have Mrs. Chen's phone records from that period. I also have her medical records showing she was admitted to San Francisco General on May 18th for chest pain. She was in the hospital for 2 days undergoing cardiac testing. He presented the documents, hospital admission forms, phone records showing no outgoing calls to Helen's number during the dates she claimed. Helen's face went pale. I must have gotten the dates wrong. You have detailed phone logs allegedly showing 17 calls, Judge Wilkins said coldly. But now the dates are wrong? I might have been mistaken. Mrs. Morrison, did someone ask you to make a false statement? Helen looked at Richard. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Mrs. Morrison, I asked you a question. Richard said Maggie had become mentally unstable, Helen said quickly. He said she'd been harassing him and Vanessa, and that someone needed to establish a pattern of erratic behavior. He said it would be better for everyone if Maggie got help. So, Richard Chen asked you to lie under oath about your sister. Helen's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Get out of my courtroom, Judge Wilkins said, and consider yourself fortunate I'm not holding you in contempt. Helen grabbed her purse and fled. I watched her go and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just a hollow space where my sister used to be, Your Honor, Gerald said desperately. My client is clearly under extreme stress. The media attention, the IRS investigation. He hasn't been thinking clearly. Is that your defense? That your client committed fraud and perjury because he was stressed? No, Your Honor. I'm requesting compassion given the circumstances. Compassion. Judge Wilkins removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Mr. Chen systematically stole from his wife for nearly 3 decades. He forged documents. He hid millions of dollars. He attempted to bribe his own son and convince his wife's sister to commit perjury. Where exactly is the compassion in any of that? Richard stood suddenly. It was supposed to be mine, he said. His voice was too loud. The business, the money, all of it. I built it. I made it successful. She just stayed home and took care of Daniel. That's not worth 40%. Sit down, Mr. Chen. No. Richard's face was red now. Sweat beaded on his forehead. You don't understand. I worked 70-hour weeks. I built relationships. I brought in clients. She did nothing. Nothing except spend my money and interfere. Mr. Chen, sit down now or I'll hold you in contempt. This is bullshit. Richard slammed his hand on the table. She doesn't deserve anything. She's just a parasite who... 2 bailiffs moved toward him. Richard backed away, still talking. The house is mine. The business is mine. She has no right to any of it. No right. The bailiffs grabbed his arms. Richard tried to pull away, and one of them pushed him firmly back into his chair. Judge Wilkins banged her gavel 3 times. Mr. Chen, you are in contempt of this court. Bailiffs, remove him. They hauled Richard to his feet. He was crying now, face red and twisted. Maggie, please don't do this. We can work something out. I'll give you money. Whatever you want. Just don't. The bailiffs dragged him toward the door. He was still talking, but I couldn't hear the words over the noise in the courtroom. Reporters were shouting questions. The judge was banging her gavel. Gerald Moss was gathering papers with shaking hands. Then Richard was gone. Out the side door that led to the holding cells. Judge Wilkins looked exhausted. We'll reconvene Monday morning at 9. Mr. Moss, I strongly suggest you have a serious conversation with your client about his options. This court is adjourned. Everyone stood. The reporters rushed out to file their stories. Richard's business associates left quickly, avoiding eye contact with me. Daniel came over. We stood there looking at each other. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, that I didn't protect you. You're protecting me now. I hugged him tight. That's what matters. Leonard joined us. Judge Wilkins is going to rule in your favor. I guarantee it. 60, maybe 70% of everything. What about Richard? He'll be lucky if he avoids prison. The IRS is building a criminal case. Wire fraud, tax evasion, perjury. Leonard shook his head. He destroyed himself. Sarah was waiting outside. She hugged me hard. You did it. You actually did it. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. 41 years of marriage ending with Richard being dragged out of court screaming. My sister exposed as a liar. My son forced to choose between his parents. This wasn't what I wanted. Not really. I'd just wanted Richard to see me, to acknowledge that I'd mattered, that our marriage had been real. Instead, I'd gotten this. Wreckage and rage and a courtroom full of strangers watching my life fall apart. My phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. You need to know something about Vanessa. Call me. I showed it to Leonard. He frowned. Probably a reporter fishing for comments. But something made me call back anyway. The phone rang twice before a woman answered. Mrs. Chen? Yes. My name is Sofia Martinez. I'm Vanessa Torres's sister-in-law. Or I was. She paused. Vanessa is already married. She never divorced her first husband. Sofia Martinez met me at a coffee shop in the Mission District on Saturday morning. She was 38, dark hair pulled back, nervous hands wrapped around a paper cup. I didn't know if I should call, she said. But when I saw the news about the divorce, about what Vanessa did to you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Tell me about the marriage, I said. Vanessa married my brother Carlos in 2015. Big wedding in Miami. 200 guests. They were married for 3 years before Carlos filed for divorce in 2018, but Vanessa refused to sign the papers. She kept stalling, saying she needed more time, that they could work it out. Sofia pulled out her phone and showed me documents. The divorce was never finalized. Carlos died in a car accident in 2019. He was still legally married to her. So when she married Richard, she committed bigamy. And Carlos wasn't her first husband. There was someone before him in 2012. That divorce also never went through. Sofia's eyes were hard. Vanessa is a con artist. She finds successful men, marries them, takes what she can, then moves on. She's been doing this for over 10 years. I thought about Vanessa in her white pantsuit, that stinky old woman. She'd been playing Richard the entire time, just like she'd played other men before him. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because Carlos was a good man and she destroyed him, took his money, his confidence, everything. Sofia leaned forward. And because women like you and me need to stick together. Vanessa shouldn't get away with this again. I gave the information to Leonard that afternoon. He immediately contacted the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. By Monday morning, there was a warrant out for Vanessa Torres on charges of bigamy and fraud. She was arrested at Miami International Airport trying to board a flight to Brazil. Judge Wilkins held the final hearing on Wednesday. Richard wasn't there. He'd been released on bail, but his attorney said he was too unwell to attend. Code for too humiliated to face everyone after his breakdown. The courtroom was quieter this time. Fewer reporters. No business associates. Just me, Leonard, Daniel, Gerald Moss, and the judge. I've reviewed all evidence presented, Judge Wilkins began. The partnership documents, the financial records, testimony from Mr. Daniel Chen and Ms. Patricia Gomez, and the additional information regarding Ms. Torres's criminal history. She looked directly at where Richard should have been sitting. This is one of the most egregious cases of financial abuse and fraud I've seen in 30 years on the bench. She read through her ruling. I was awarded 60% of all marital assets, approximately $5 million. The house in Pacific Heights, the vacation cabin in Tahoe, 60% of Chen and Associates Consulting, which I could liquidate or run as I saw fit. Additionally, Judge Wilkins continued, Mrs. Chen will receive spousal support of $6,500 per month for life or until she remarries. Mr. Chen will be responsible for all court costs and attorney fees for both parties. Gerald Moss sat very still. He didn't object or argue. There was nothing left to argue. As for Mr. Chen's criminal exposure, the judge said, I'm forwarding all evidence of fraud, forgery, and tax evasion to the appropriate federal authorities. The IRS has already filed charges. The district attorney may file additional charges related to attempted bribery and subordination of perjury. She banged her gavel once. This divorce is granted. We're adjourned. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Leonard guided me past them to his car. Daniel followed, walking close beside me. "How do you feel, Mrs. Chen?" someone yelled. I didn't answer. How did I feel? Not happy, not vindicated, just tired. 41 years of marriage reduced to a dollar amount and a judge's ruling. At Leonard's house, Sarah had made lunch. We sat around the kitchen table, the four of us, eating sandwiches and not saying much. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked finally. I'd been thinking about that for weeks, about what came after the anger and the court battles and the victory that didn't feel like winning. "I want to start a business," I said, "a consulting firm for women going through divorce. Help them understand their finances, their rights, make sure they don't get erased the way Richard tried to erase me." Daniel looked up. "I could help with the legal side. I'm not practicing right now anyway." "You'd work with me?" "If you'll have me." He set down his sandwich. "Mom, I should have protected you years ago. Let me do it now." 2 months later, we opened Chen Financial Advocacy in a small office in the Richmond district. Just me, Daniel, and a part-time accountant named Grace, who'd been through her own terrible divorce and wanted to help other women avoid the same mistakes. Our first client was a 58-year-old teacher whose husband claimed she'd never contributed to his construction business. We found documentation proving she'd worked as his unpaid bookkeeper for 20 years. She got 40% in the settlement. Our second client was a widow whose stepchildren were trying to contest their father's will. We helped her enforce the estate documents and keep the house her husband had left her. Word spread. By month 3, we had a waiting list. Richard's business collapsed in September. The IRS seized most of his assets to cover back taxes and penalties. He owed $780,000 in fines. His attorney's fees alone were over $200,000. Chen and Associates Consulting closed its doors after 40 years. I felt nothing when Daniel showed me the news article. That business had stopped being mine decades ago. Now it was just gone. Richard moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Daly City, the same neighborhood where I'd lived when he'd frozen my accounts and tried to make me disappear. I heard through Daniel that he'd taken a job as a contractor at a small consulting firm, making maybe $60,000 a year, a fraction of what he'd earned before. Vanessa was convicted of bigamy and fraud. She got 18 months in federal prison. Her lawyers tried to negotiate a deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested. She'd victimized too many people. Helen called in October. I was in the office reviewing a client's financial statements when my phone rang. Her name on the screen made my stomach tighten. I let it go to voicemail. She called again that night, and the next morning, and 3 more times over the next week. I never answered. Finally, she left a message. "Maggie, it's me. I know you probably hate me. I hate myself for what I did. Richard, he convinced me you'd become a different person, that you needed help. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I was jealous of what you had and I wanted to see you fail. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk? I miss my sister." Daniel was with me when I played it. "Are you going to call her back?" "I don't know." I stared at my phone. She tried to destroy me in court. She lied under oath. How do I forgive that? "Do you want to forgive her?" That was the question. Did I want Helen back in my life? The sister who'd disappeared when our mother was dying, who'd borrowed money and never repaid it, who'd testified against me to please a man who'd used her and discarded her just like he'd used everyone else. "Maybe someday," I said, "but not now." Helen called again the following week. I let it ring. In November, Daniel and I had lunch with Patricia Gomez. She'd become a friend during the months of investigation, someone who understood what it meant to rebuild after everything fell apart. "I saw Richard last week," Patricia said, "at the grocery store in Daly City. He looked awful, 20 pounds heavier, unshaven. He was buying ramen noodles and cheap beer." "Did he see you?" I asked. "Yes." He turned around and walked the other way. She sipped her water. "He's living the life he tried to force on you. Tiny apartment, no money, no respect. It's almost poetic." It was poetic. But it didn't make me happy. I'd loved Richard once, built a life with him, had a child with him. Watching him fall so far felt hollow. He did this to himself, Daniel said quietly. Every choice, every lie, this is what he earned. That was true too. December brought our biggest month yet. 15 new clients, 3 successful settlements. One woman who thanked me with tears in her eyes because we'd helped her keep the house where she'd raised her children. "You saved my life," she'd said. "I didn't know what I was going to do." That felt better than any court victory, better than the money or the house or watching Richard's empire crumble. On Christmas Eve, Daniel and I had dinner at my new apartment. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms in the Sunset District. But it was mine, paid for with my money. Decorated the way I wanted. We cooked together. Roast chicken and vegetables. Daniel's girlfriend Emma joined us. She was smart and kind and didn't take any of Daniel's lawyer bullshit. I liked her immediately. "Your mom's amazing," Emma told Daniel over dessert. "Building this business from nothing, helping so many women." "She's always been amazing," Daniel said. "I just forgot that for a while." After they left, I sat by my window looking out at the fog rolling in from the ocean. My phone was on the table beside me. Helen had called again that morning. Another voicemail I hadn't listened to. Maybe next year I'd be ready to hear what she had to say. Maybe I'd find a way to forgive her. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe some betrayals were too deep to heal. But that was a decision for future Maggie. Tonight, I was content. The business was growing. Daniel and I were rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. I had friends like Leonard and Sarah and Patricia who'd stood by me when everyone else disappeared. I had a life that was entirely mine, not built on someone else's money or success or approval, just mine. My phone buzzed. Text from Daniel. "Thank you for dinner, Mom. And thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. I love you." I typed back, "I love you too. See you Monday at the office." Outside, the fog had covered everything in white. Somewhere in this city, Richard was alone in his apartment eating ramen. Vanessa was in prison counting down the months until release. Helen was waiting for a phone call that might never come. And I was here, free, strong, finally visible after decades of being erased. The old Maggie would have felt guilty about that, would have worried about Richard's suffering, or Helen hurting, or whether I was being too harsh. But the old Maggie was gone. She'd died in that courtroom when Richard called her a parasite, when Vanessa called her a stinky old woman, when Helen chose lies over loyalty. The new Maggie knew her worth, knew that taking up space wasn't selfish, that protecting yourself wasn't cruel. The new Maggie was done being invisible. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow, I had 3 client meetings and a consultation with a woman whose husband claimed she'd never worked, despite raising 5 children and managing his dental practice for 20 years. Tomorrow, I'd help her fight, help her win, help her see that she mattered even if no one else had bothered to notice. Tomorrow was going to be a good day. What would you do if you were Maggie? Would you forgive Helen? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one.